Hello, good evening. Welcome to today's Bible study on Joseph interprets dreams. This is a very important event in the life of Joseph. We'll find out that the great blessing that came onto Joseph, the blessing that he was to his family, to himself, and to several nations through several generations up to today, that the blessing may have been triggered by an event that happened as recorded in this Bible passage. We will recall that Joseph was sold to slavery by his brothers, and then while at Potiphar's house in Egypt, he did very well. He brought a lot of prosperity to Potiphar's house, but he ran into problem with Potiphar's wife. The wife framed him and convinced her husband that Joseph attacked her and wanted to go to bed with her. Her husband, Potiphar, got annoyed and threw Joseph in jail and forgot about him. So today we are going to talk about his experience in jail, wonderful things that he accomplished in jail, and his release from jail. So we are going to learn that while Joseph was in Potiphar's jail, he had compassion for two prisoners that joined him from Pharaoh's cabinet or Pharaoh's staff. And this incident of compassion was in fact an opportunity for blessing. But when Joseph encountered this opportunity, he sensed a certain opportunity being presented to him. But we'll find out that the opportunity he sensed, as a matter of fact, did not materialize. But the opportunity that materialized and blossomed into a grand blessing, that he never sensed it. But he did accept the opportunity, not because he knew about it, but because he had compassion on the two prisoners that were working with him. We will find that the opportunity for a great blessing for Joseph was presented to him in the form of an opportunity to help somebody in need. And we will discuss this carefully, because often opportunities to be blessed are presented to us in the form of opportunities to do something for somebody. And we accept that opportunity by recognizing the need and feeling the sense of compassion, feeling compassion towards the individual, and doing what we can to provide for the need. We will also learn that competence comes from God. We know this already, but we see illustrations of this in the passage. We'll start with Potiphar's life Joseph's life in Potiphar's jail. Joseph, we know, is somebody that was sensitive to the need around him, somebody that did things in a way that made people see the hand of God in what he was doing. And this came out even in jail when he should be bitter. Remember, he was thrown in jail in circumstances in which really he did nothing wrong. So he should be a bitter person. He should be somebody that should recoil to himself and say, hey, this world is so wicked. What have I done? Why is all this happening to me? And become an enemy to everybody. But instead, he remained a friend of everybody. He remained attentive to the needs around him. And these characteristics were noticed by people. It's not just that he was saying it or anything like that. People saw him as somebody that cares about people. The prison warder, the prison officer saw this and recognized that Joseph was not only a compassionate person, but also he's somebody that can get things done. He knew how to organize people. He knew how to take care of people. So he was appointed in charge of other prisoners and in charge of all prison activities. He remained a prisoner himself, so let's not get this wrong. He was not, his position didn't change. He was just given responsibilities in recognition of the fact that he was somebody that really cares and knew how to organize people. Let us read about this in Genesis 39, Genesis 39, verses 21 to 23.
Genesis 39. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph, and gave him success in whatever he did.
The warden paid no attention to whatever was handed over to Joseph. Essentially, he trusted Joseph so much, he knew of Joseph's capabilities. So whatever he gave over to Joseph, he didn't worry about it, because he knew that Joseph will handle it right. Then, a short while during this period, Joseph was joined in prison. Two people came from Pharaoh's staff and were thrown in jail, in the same jail that Joseph was. The Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker had problem with their master, and they were thrown in jail. They were placed under Joseph's care, just like all other prisoners. Then one night, each of the two men had a dream, and this dream appeared meaningful to them. They knew, they believed in their heart that the dream meant something, but they didn't see anybody that can interpret the dream for them. So they were troubled, they were worried. What does this dream mean? Before we talk about the dream, let's read about this setting from Genesis 40.
Genesis 40. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them after they had been in custody for some time. Each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own.
Well, Joseph saw that these two people, he came out in the morning, saw them, he saw that they were sad. Something was bothering these people. They didn't talk to him. Nobody told him and said, oh, these people, there's something wrong with them. He was just looking at them. He knew that something was wrong. And being somebody that cared, he immediately developed a commitment to help them get out of that sadness. So he wanted to know what the problem was. When they told him that it was about a dream, that they had a dream, they felt the dream meant something, and they needed somebody to interpret. I believe, the Bible doesn't tell us so, but I believe at first Joseph didn't really know what to do. But he was committed. He determined to do something for these people. And he believed, when he heard it was about dream. Remember, Joseph had never interpreted dream for anybody. So he had no experience with interpreting dreams. But he believed in God. He knew that God could do this, could help him help these people. All he wanted was to help them. So he said to them, well, doesn't dream interpretation belong to God? Tell me your dreams. Which is like a prayer saying, God will interpret your dreams through me. I believe, I have faith in God that he will interpret your dreams through me. Tell me your dreams. Now, this offer to help these people, remember, it's not really about dream. I don't think Joseph was looking for to train himself as a dream interpreter. It wasn't about dream, but it was about recognizing that there is a need, that these two people were in need, and he needed to do something to help them. So this could come in any form. The reason I'm emphasizing this is that this became a pivotal event in Joseph's life. Pivotal in the sense that it triggered a chain of events that ultimately led to a grand blessing, as we will see. We are not going to talk about the blessing in this Bible study. In fact, we've talked about it before, but it will be in another Bible study. But we will see how, well, we will lead to the edge of the blessing, to the beginning. And eventually we'll see all of it because it happened over several passages. But this event of Joseph recognizing a need, having compassion on the people that had the need, and then thinking of what he could do to help them. And then eventually doing something to help them. This was a pivotal event in Joseph's life. He didn't know what this would lead to, but he did it because he cared for the people. I'm emphasizing this because caring for people is what God created us to do. When you, first of all, be attentive to the needs around you, and when you recognize the need, think of what you can do to help. And if you can find something to do, find a way to do it. At times it may not be you doing everything yourself. At times it may be you organizing other people to do it, or maybe just telling the people how to do it. But look for an opportunity to provide for a need when a need exists. And that is what Joseph did here. Let us read about it in Genesis 40 verses 6 to 8.
Genesis 40. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why are your faces so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams."
Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. Then the chief cupbearer told his dream. We are going to read about it. I don't want to try to rehearse the dream. We're going to read about it. But Joseph listened to his dream and predicted that Pharaoh will restore the chief cupbearer to his position in 3 days. Let us read about that. Genesis 40, verses 9 to 13. Yes.
So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it had budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." "This is what it means," Joseph said to him. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you had used to do when you were his cupbearer."
So Joseph had a good interpretation for the chief cupbearer. In 3 days, he will be released from prison and returned to his position. Then the chief baker was encouraged, and he told his own dream to Joseph. Joseph interpreted his dream, but the interpretation was not good. He predicted that Pharaoh would execute the chief baker in 3 days. Let us read about this in Genesis 40, verses 16 to 19.
When the chief baker saw that Joseph was given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." "This is what it means," Joseph said. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat away your flesh."
After the interpretation, Joseph sensed an opportunity. Remember, he was thrown in jail with no justification. He was left to rot in jail. There was no appeal. So now he has interpreted a dream to Pharaoh's chief cupbearer that meant that the man will be going back to his close association with Pharaoh in 3 days' time. So Joseph sensed that this was an opportunity to send an appeal, to talk to somebody that will be working hand in hand with Pharaoh. So he talked to the chief cupbearer. He said, "Please, when things go well with you, please remember me." We emphasize the tone of this because Joseph really was hurting in jail. The fact that he was chief prisoner or prisoner in charge did not lighten his position in any way. He was still under confinement. He was still a prisoner in every sense. So he wanted out. And I'm sure he prayed to God several times to come out. And he saw this as an opportunity to maybe get an appeal. He said, "Please plead my case with Pharaoh. I was forcibly brought here from the land of Hebrews. And even while I was here, I did my job. I did what I was supposed to do in my master's house. But I was thrown in jail unjustly." The chief cupbearer was restored to his position, but he forgot Joseph. That means the opportunity that Joseph sensed, what he saw was, God-given opportunity to bring him out of jail, did not materialize. Let us read about that. Genesis 40, 2 sections.
"But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. For I was forcibly carried off from the land of Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all of his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, so that he once again put up the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him.
The chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. So, from a human, take of Joseph as a human person, because that's what he was. He was every bit human. So he had prayed and put all his hope in this. For the next 2 years, nothing happened, which maybe after 1 year will begin to mean to him that God did not answer his prayer. And this is an important lesson to all of us, that when we pray, even when God has heard our prayer, well, this is maybe premature because we haven't seen the end of this story. The end is that, yes, God had a plan to bring Joseph out of jail, but it was a grand plan. He was waiting for the right time to do it. And that right time was not within the first 2 years after Joseph interpreted dreams for his fellow prisoners. So as a human being, Joseph may have felt disappointed. We need to learn the same lesson. When you pray, always recognize that God has his own plan, and at times his plan may be different from what you have prayed for. At times, that even when he answered your prayer, even when he grants your prayer, at times he may do it in a way different from your expectation. But have faith in God that if you pray the right prayer, if you pray for something that helps you advance the image of God, because that's what he told us, that if we pray in his name, which means if we pray for something that conveys his image, then he will answer our prayer exactly as we prayed. So have confidence that God will fulfill this promise. If you pray such a prayer, have faith in God to fulfill the promise. The fulfillment may not come at the time that you expect it, and it may not come in the form that you expect it. In this case, and I can tell you, if Joseph was released from jail the way he wanted, we will not be talking about him today, because he'll be released and he will be gone, disappear in Egypt, and maybe find his way back to Canaan and rejoice with his family. But that would have been the end of him, and we would have no historical significance whatsoever. But it is that the will of God came through in his life. That's why we're talking about him today. So how did it come through? Well, 2 years later, Pharaoh had 2 dreams that troubled him. We will read about the dreams. But what he did was he called his magicians and all the people that can see through the dark. He called his magicians and all the people that can see through the dark to interpret the dreams for him. And none of them could help him. They could not interpret the dreams. Then at that point, the chief cupbearer remembered Joseph. He remembered Joseph, a young Hebrew that interpreted dreams accurately. This was the impression that he conveyed to Pharaoh. Let us read about it in Genesis 41.
Genesis 41, verses 1 to 13. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile. When out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the riverbank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads of grain sprouted thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the seven healthy, full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. In the morning his mind was troubled, so he sent for the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dream, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And the things turned out exactly as he has interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hanged."
Let us step back a little bit and look at what happened here. When Joseph interpreted the dreams for the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, what in fact was happening is that he was demonstrating to them that he could interpret dreams. He was demonstrating, that is, doing this for them. The compassion he had on them to help them gave him an opportunity to demonstrate a competence that would be needed in Pharaoh's house 2 years later. Of course, Joseph didn't know this. The chief cupbearer didn't know that either. The chief cupbearer, in fact, didn't care when he left. Who is this Hebrew boy? You know, yeah, he interpreted dream for me. So what? So he forgot about Joseph. But then the need came. Pharaoh had dreams, and nobody could interpret the dreams. So the chief cupbearer remembered Joseph. He didn't remember Joseph because he cared for Joseph. He remembered Joseph because Joseph is competent in something that is needed. Well, think about this when you help people, because that's in fact one of the things that can happen. That when you help somebody, you are demonstrating a way to do something. You are demonstrating a knowledge in something. You are introducing yourself. That is part of what happens when you help somebody, when you do something for somebody. In this case, Joseph was handing out a business card, a single business card, to the one person that will need his service. And 2 years later, when this individual needed the service, he remembered the business card, pulled it out, and asked for the Joseph to be called. So Pharaoh had Joseph brought from jail to interpret the dream. Up to this point, Joseph was a forgotten prisoner. We will read about this because as soon as he was released from jail, before he could even present himself to Pharaoh, the first thing he did was to take a shower and shave. This information is in the Bible to remind us that Joseph was indeed in jail. He was a prisoner. Let us read about the incident in Genesis 41, 14 to 16.
So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I cannot do it, Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires.
God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Competence comes from God, and twice now we've seen Joseph acknowledge that very readily in front of people. Acknowledge it to himself, acknowledge it to God, but acknowledge it to people, tell people about it. To the two prisoners, chief cupbearer and chief baker, he said, don't interpretations come from God? Then here, he's telling Pharaoh, said God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. I cannot do it. I cannot interpret dreams, but God will interpret your dreams through me. So Joseph explained to Pharaoh that the dreams were in fact a revelation, that God was telling him what was going to happen in Egypt in the next 14 years. He said there will be 7 years of abundance, and Egypt will have so much. The farmlands will be exploding with the farm produce. So 7 years of abundance, but then this will quickly disappear as they will be followed by 7 years of severe famine. The famine will be so severe that it will wipe out every evidence of the 7 years of abundance. Let us read about this in Genesis 41.
Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up after the 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain, scorched by the east wind. They are the 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt. But 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon.
The matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. So he has predicted 14 eventful years, 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of extremely severe famine. Joseph was called to interpret dream. So at this point he has done what he was called to do. But a characteristic of Joseph does not let him leave people with problem. He saw the problem, And he didn't want to just leave it there. He proposed to Pharaoh a plan, something that Pharaoh could do to prepare for the 7 years of famine. In other words, to use the information that was revealed to him in the dream to prepare to help Egypt go through the 7 years of famine successfully. So he said, appoint somebody, he called it a wise and discerning man, in charge of a special program. And the special program will be to build up grain reserves during the 7 years of abundance. The details are in the Bible, we're going to read it. Then he said, hold these reserves under the authority of Pharaoh, and then use them during the 7 years of famine to feed the people, to fight the famine. Let us look at Genesis 41, verses 33 to 36.
And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man, and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country, to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine.
Well, Pharaoh was amazed, first of all, at the accuracy of dream interpretation, that the interpretation was given in very material terms. It was not gobbledygook. It was a clear language. Here is what is going to happen. Then here is what you can do about it. So in listening to Joseph, I mean, Pharaoh had not encountered Joseph before. As far as we are told, the Bible doesn't tell us of any previous encounter. But during this encounter, I think Pharaoh was, he really was taken, he fell with Joseph. He realized that there was something very special about this young man. Joseph was about 30 years old at the time of this incident. So Pharaoh recognized that this was the work of God. Remember, Pharaoh was not a Christian. Egypt was not a land of Christians at that time. They worshipped their own, they had their own worships, and Pharaoh was kind of closest to God. So there was no closest to their God, not really God. Their belief in God was not, one of the things they were associated with. But here he recognized, just through the behavior of Joseph, through the words that come out of Joseph's mouth, through the things that Joseph told him, through the amount of reliability, the sense of reliability that he felt, he realized that this was somebody that was with God. And he realized also that the expertise that Joseph was demonstrated could not have come from an individual, that he had to have come from God. So Pharaoh recognized this. Understand what is happening here, that Joseph, without directly preaching Christianity, without directly preaching, well, there was Christianity wasn't the name at that time, it was worship of God. Without directly preaching God, he had actually conveyed the image of God to Pharaoh. He had, in fact, made an impression on Pharaoh that the God he, Joseph, worshipped was a God that can be relied on. So Pharaoh relied on his God and also relied on Joseph. Because of that, he said, look, he turned around and asked his cabinet and said, can you think of anybody wiser and more discerning than this young man? Anybody more suited to run this program that this young man has recommended to us? And his cabinet quickly agreed with him that Joseph was the right person. And there and then, a prisoner from the land of Hebrews, that's a slave, a Hebrew slave that was kept in jail, supposedly as somebody that wasn't worth to stay with free people, was in one incident taken out of jail, and he's about to be appointed to the highest position in the land of Egypt. So that's what happened. Let us read about this in Genesis 41, verses 37 to 40.
The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked him, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you.
You will be in charge of my palace. You will be in charge of Egypt. You will be second to me, but you will be in charge of everything. It is only with respect to the throne that I will be greater than you." Think of this. This is a human being, was taken from jail just a few hours earlier. He was in jail, in a dungeon, forgotten. And he was taken from there, and now he is second only to Pharaoh in the land of Egypt. Egypt at that time was like they had the status of the United States. He said it was the place that the whole world went for things. So this was not a small country. This was not a small appointment. Well, let's see what we learn from these interactions. We cannot overemphasize this, that being attentive to the needs around you. This is what God created us to do. God created us to be his provider assistant. When he wants to do something for people, he often looks for a human being to do it through a human being, to do it for them in a natural way. Therefore, it is in your role as provider assistant, one of the things you need to do is to be attentive to the needs around you. Then when you identify a need, seek to provide for the need. Commit to doing something. Commit to, that is, think about what you can do. Think about it as if you have been given the responsibility, and indeed you may have been given the responsibility by God. So think about what you can do to help provide for a need that you have identified. This is the only thing that Joseph did that set off a chain of events that has brought him to where we saw him this night. It was simply by being compassionate to people, recognizing, identifying a need, and committing to do something to provide for that need, and asking God to help him. He wanted so much to help that he asked God to help him. He prayed for God to show him what he can do, to show him a way to do it. What else did we learn? Well, again, summarizing the same thing. Joseph was attentive to the needs and committed to providing for these needs. There are two examples we saw in this passage, in this story. First of all, when he was faced with prisoners that needed someone to interpret their dream, he prayed for God to help him interpret the dream through him. This was because of a commitment to do something for them. Then when he interpreted dreams for Pharaoh, he didn't just stop with the dream interpretation. He continued by proposing a policy plan. And that policy plan that he proposed, it was not the dream interpretation per se that gave Joseph the appointment. It was the dream interpretation and the policy plan that he proposed that Pharaoh looked at and said, "Hey, who can do this better than you? Come on, you are now my second in command." You know, if Pharaoh almost handed Egypt to Joseph, except, as he said, for matters of the throne. Well, as Joseph did in this passage, recognize that competence comes from God. It doesn't matter, yes, you say, oh yeah, I went to school to learn it and all that. Whatever competence you have really has been given to you by God so that you can use it in your function as God's provider assistant. Now, as we learned in the past, providing for a need doesn't mean you have to do everything free. No. You can in fact develop enterprise, develop things that you do and sell for money because you recognize the need and you want to provide for it. The person that invented the light bulb, he saw a need and recognized what was needed and then did the research, and eventually the research resulted in an invention that we all take for granted today. His family is still probably still is making money from it. It doesn't diminish his accomplishment. He did something for human beings, something that God, part of what God created him to do. So always recognize that the competence you have was given to you by God, and acknowledge it to God, acknowledge it to yourself, and acknowledge it to the people around you, so that they will know about it. When Joseph was presented a dream in jail, a dream interpretation opportunity, he acknowledged that it is God that will do it. When Pharaoh called him to interpret dreams for him, he acknowledged that it was God that will do it. And then his godliness, the image of God that he conferred, convinced Pharaoh also that competence, that Joseph's expertise came from God. Do you have any questions, Kosi?
I'm fine.
You're fine? Okay. Okay. Well, we thank everybody that will view or listen to the audio of this Bible study. This was indeed a special Bible study, one that I'm very passionate about, because it demonstrates to us that when we perform the function that God created us to perform, that we can, by accepting an opportunity to perform a function, we could at the same time be accepting an opportunity for a grand blessing. And may all those who listen to this Bible study learn this lesson and maybe learn other things that we did not emphasize. And we pray that what you hear and learn through this Bible study will make a positive impact in your life and bring you closer to God's purpose for your life. Thank you, and God bless you.